I'm ready. Give me that 3, 2, 1 deal. I asked for green M&Ms. We are live. We are live. We are live. Welcome. Which camera? We'll go to. How you guys doing? Great. Great. That sounded good. I hope that sounded great out to you guys tuning in. I am happy to be here at Adorama. I have spoken at this store a number of times at this event center, and you'll see a little bit of who I am. My name is Mike Corrado, and I've worked with Nikon for 35 years. So that means I have been there for a very long time. And I started right out of college, and it was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me in life, because Nikon, as you will see, has given me so many opportunities to be in so many different places and actually learn this business from the inside out. Maybe this sounds familiar to you. My dad had a darkroom at home. My dad was a huge photography fan. He was an engineer, worked for Grumman Aircraft on Long Island, worked for a lot of engineering companies or electronic companies. And he had that darkroom down in the basement, and that's where we connected as father and son. My mother was an artist and an illustrator, and we got connected by that darkroom, and I watched him make prints that started off as this white piece of paper in this red lit room, and all of a sudden this image came on them, and I was fascinated by that whole process. I actually wanted to get into design graphics first, but photography came along, and I kind of caught that bug. And got a job with Nikon, and I've been through 8 or 9 different jobs with Nikon, teaching Nikon school, running a training department, doing customer service online. And throughout the years have learned so much about photography, and we just keep learning, right? It's just a learning process that never ends. And as we transition from film to digital and all kinds of new technologies, staying in front of that is what we have to do. Of all the titles I've ever held at Nikon, though, one thing that connected me to a beautiful place on Long Island called the Ronald McDonald House probably changed my life. And that was a few short 8 years ago when I started going in and doing portraits. So this program is about portrait photography. And we will talk nuts and bolts. If you have questions about technology or f-stop shutter speeds, anything I've done with light, speed lights, please ask. But I also want to touch the emotional side of connecting with people when you're making portraits. So you're here, I assume, because you love taking portraits, or you're tuning in for the same reason. It wasn't exactly the thing that inspired me in photography early on. I was into sports. I was into action. I thought I would be a pro football player, but you just don't make it when you're my height and you're slow like I am. I loved baseball growing up, so I played high school baseball and tried to go into college and realized, you know, you just don't have the talent. But right there in college, when I started photographing sports for the sports information department, I actually got a whole $750 scholarship each year. And I thought that was the best thing ever. And I realized that my process of going to school for design graphics or going through that process was something I was interested in, but photography caught my interest even more from what I was inspired to do at home with my dad, and then I started doing in college. And this is Dylan. You're going to meet Dylan and a bunch of other kids that I photographed at Ronald McDonald House, and how I got connected to those families. So from sports and action, I transitioned into portraits. I've done a little bit of nature and landscape. That's not my bag. You'll see a little bit of what I do here. I was born and raised in New York. I spent 9 years in California with Nikon. And again, through that entire process, those years, I've learned so much. And I just start to crave information and crave situations. And I would almost believe that there's some, in a medical dictionary somewhere, some kind of clinical term for this addiction that I have to making pictures. And you probably feel the same way, because you feel the chemistry churning in your body. You feel how your heart gets involved. You feel like, if you ever feel this, you don't take pictures for a few days after taking a lot of pictures, that your artistic, creative brain just starts to go haywire. And then I have to go in the office and work on Excel spreadsheets, which is the least motivating thing I could ever do in life. And I start to go a little stir crazy. I have things that happen throughout the year where I work with Live Nation at the Jones Beach Theater, and I've been the house photographer there for 9 years. So I have 3 months of shooting between June, July, August, and a little bit into September. And then when the camera goes down, I start to lose my mind if I don't try to do something else. I love photographing birds. I do that in Stony Brook, Long Island. Anybody been to Stony Brook or know of Stony Brook? There's a fascinating lake there, and when I went there and thought it was just ducks and, you know, some swans and a couple of Canada geese, as I was corrected at a wildlife seminar, I said Canadian geese, but it's not, it's Canada geese. I found that there were more birds like egrets and cormorants and things that I want to learn. Once I get attached to something, you may appreciate this, you lock in and you just keep going back, and there's no end to that project, the progress that you make making pictures. And I will go out and shoot redundant pictures over and over again, thinking that I'm going to find something else. So up front, you start to shoot a lot and you get a lot back, and then you start to get there and you'll shoot a lot and only get a little back. But if you don't go, you can't make the pictures. And I learned that very early on. So in talking about portraits, I think this is probably the earliest portrait that I have of myself that my dad took. Again, he was a hobbyist and shooting pictures all the time, and I'm there with my mom. And I think the thing that this reminds me of is a thing we'll talk about a lot today, which is gesture. Little gestures, little moments. To me, there's no secret to life other than the fact that we live through moments. And those moments could be good, they could be bad, they could be precious, they could be tragic. But when it comes to portraits, I'm looking for the best gesture and moment that's going to draw you into that moment. It's not always about just staring into a camera and looking. And I thought I'd lay it out on the line. And how many of you have actually ever had a picture posted on some social site that somebody else took that you had no control over, that you weren't happy with? And you can't do anything about it except call that person and say, can you take that down? Why did you do that to me? Why would you embarrass? I've bent over. I don't look good. I got 6 chins. Whatever it is, you don't feel good about it. And I'd also like to start off by saying, when you take portraits of people, your job is to make them look amazing. Your job is to find the moments and make them look really good. Make them look dignified. We'll talk a lot about dignity. And to me, when you do that, especially with people that you want to work with, people that are paying you to do this, or people that you want to have in front of your camera again and again and again, if you make bad pictures of them, they're not going to want you to come back and shoot them again. But if you make flattering pictures of them, they're going to draw you in. It happens a lot with me in rock and roll and performers. You're there to make them look good. And so this is one of my favorite portraits, a guy named Tom Bowl, who's a really cool adventure photographer. We were at a workshop together for a country music association, and he took this portrait of me. It just sort of happenstance. We were teaching lighting and portraits. And I always want to remind people that you have to find the sense of humor in you as well. It's not always serious. I was actually given this nose working through the charities that I work with, and there's nothing like the look on a child's face when they turn back, they don't expect it, and they see this red nose, and the look that they will give to the camera is pretty amazing. And I've also got these little stuffed animals that I have that go over the front of the lens, little tiny animals. We actually package them with one of our lower-end DSLRs and in a kit. But you want reaction from people, and you have to be prepared and ready for that. But have a sense of humor. Impact, energy, and emotion. If I had 3 things that I would lay out as the criteria for what would make a great photo, it should have impact, it should have great energy, and it should have emotion. And when I say energy, it doesn't necessarily mean a horse running towards you on a racing track. There are different types of energies, and I try to get these 3 things as part of my entire photo, but it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes it's impact alone. Sometimes it's emotion alone, which in turn kind of connects with impact. Sometimes the energy is not as high as I'd like it to be, but maybe it doesn't fit for that kind of photo. And when I go through some of these, this is just a little portfolio to get to know you of the years that I've been making pictures through Nikon at different Nikon events and Olympics and World Series and Super Bowls and things like that. I've had a great opportunity to do that kind of shooting. Working behind the scenes at some of our advertising shoots and covering off angles that the main photographer needed help covering off just to try to make something happen. This was an ad for the Nikon D3 when it first came out. It was a full frame camera. We were trying to show low light. There was a reason for all of this. We were trying to do it with the widest possible lens because that couldn't be done before the D3 came out. And we put it all together, shot at super high ISOs. That's actually magnesium pucks that they put on the rider's knees to create that nice spark. And we actually looked at the level of theatrics to what's real and what's not. And you piece it all together in an ad shoot like this, and all I want to do is just try to make a nice action picture with a 400mm lens. Back out on the island in Port Jefferson, at a place called West Meadow Beach. It's one of my favorite places when the winds kick up because you got all the kiteboarders and sailors out there for some really high-end action. And when this kind of stuff happens, it's amazing. Having that sports background, I always loved action pictures. And what I love about the action type shots is when the moments come, if you miss it, they don't come again. And that's the challenge. And you have to be ready, and you have to know you're going to fail, and you have to know you're going to pick it up. I want to do a quick poll. How many people have failed taking a picture before? So we all agree that that's going to happen every time we pick up a camera, possibly. But from the failure comes a success. The good news is we can crack off as many pictures as we want that our cards will hold. And if you don't have enough, you come back here to Adorama, you buy more cards, and you shoot some more. How many people like to delete in the camera on the fly? I try to never do that, because once I have deleted a really good picture, and now I will wait and I will throw it out, or I'll buy more hard drives. I'm paranoid that way. But it is something that you always have to think about. But let it go. Try it. Fail so you can succeed. Sometimes you call them happy accidents. When you trip, the camera goes off, and there's a beautiful picture waiting for you. Action. I used to work with my good friend Al at the New York Jets and help him out and cover games. Man, it was such a burden to go from Eastern Long Island out over the bridges, cover a 2.5-hour football game, and drive probably 6 hours in the car just to cover a football game. But on one day, getting up, persistence, perseverance. It happened to be the snowiest day in the history of the Meadowlands. And there was nothing like photographing football in the snow. I photographed horse racing in the sun. I photographed football games on beautiful days. But there's nothing better than the elements changing to make a picture more dynamic. And Curtis Martin, Hall of Fame football player, comes running at my camera. This was actually cropped from a horizontal picture, and I made probably the best sports picture I could have ever made. New York Mets, I've worked with the Mets. I still work with the New York Mets. My buddy Mark Levine is their team photographer, and I try to help cover off angles and places within the stadium that he can't cover, and I'll be going there Sunday for the first time this year. Some pretty epic moments that happen. I mean, the picture of Mike Piazza is not at all the best baseball picture I've ever shot, but you know what that shot is? His home run in the bottom of the 8th against the Atlanta Braves, the first game when they came back from 9/11. It was a very emotional time. Did you have a question, sir?
What's the ISO like?
Yeah, the question, if you didn't hear it, and if you're tuning in, is what was the ISO? Typically, my ISO is 1600 to 2500. Back then, the picture of Endy Chavez, that was a great catch during the playoffs. And I would probably say we're pushing the ISO to about 2000 at the highest. It was with a D200 back then. As the cameras have evolved from D3 to D4 to D5, we can shoot astronomical ISOs now. So we've been given a gift in performance in these types of situations. Back, Mike Piazza was probably the D1H. So we were probably pushing about 800 to 1600 ISO as fast as we could possibly go.
And do you have any shutter speed in your mind, like before you sit down and...
Absolutely. So the question is do I have any shutter speeds in mind? Now more than ever, that's an amazing question for sports photography. How many were around when we had the 1 over the focal length rule? So 1 over the focal length, let's say you're holding a 60mm lens, you should be at about a 60th of a second to get a good sharp image. If it's, you know, a 500mm lens, it should be 1 over 500 or a 500th of a second. That was a standard rule in photography. Take that number and double it, and that's what you look for in shutter speed now. You want as fast a shutter speed as you can possibly handhold to make a move. A camera like the D850 has such high resolution, you have to be smart about how you use the camera. But a lot of times, even outdoors, photographing birds, I was just down in Florida, you'll see a couple of pictures if I actually move forward here. And I'm actually shooting 800 to 1600 out in bright light sometimes because the ISO can handle it, and it still looks pretty pristine. This was at the World Series a couple of years ago. I talk about gesture and moments. Syndergaard, the Mets pitcher, Noah Syndergaard, comes out. He's a rookie. He's young. He throws the ball over the head of the batter, the first batter to come up. Why? Because the first batter to come up hit a home run off Matt Harvey in the first game. And the first batters were coming up, and they were jumping all over the first pitches. So Syndergaard threw it right over his head. And then in the media after the game, he said, I'm 60 foot 6 inches away. If anybody's got a problem with that, this is my territory. He certainly wasn't trying to hurt anybody, but he was certainly trying to get them to back off that first pitch, to get them to think about not standing in that box so close. And of course, the catcher, Darno, comes up and sort of draws that line with Noah to say, this is our space. So moments like that, to me, are just epic. I run a lot of remote cameras. I'm actually going to do that on Sunday, where we put these on the rails inside the dugout. and I have a remote in my hand, or when I trigger a camera, it actually fires the other remotes. And this was during the World Series. A young kid, Michael Corrado, comes out from nowhere and hits 2 home runs in the World Series. But different sporting events, games, things that I do, moments, action. This is the first time the Queen of England came to the Kentucky Derby, which is coming up this weekend. I used to work with a magazine called The Blood Horse. It deals with the bloodline of horses out of Lexington, Kentucky. And I thought it was fascinating that the Prime Minister and her husband were looking right across her, and she could care less about what they were saying because she was so fascinated by that scene that she had seen for the very first time in her life. A lot of great places that Nikon's taken me to. I just came back from this place in Florida called Blue Cypress, where we photographed osprey. It is the world's largest population of osprey breeding. And I went with my buddy Keith Ludzinski and my buddy John and Ian, my buddies John and Ian. And we're going to actually make this a ritual every year, but I'm not going to tell you exactly where it is. But this is off the lake in Stony Brook. Again, the moments that come by, cormorants, fish. How did I know this cormorant was going to take off? Studying the behaviors of whatever it is you're photographing is so critical to being able to make a great picture the next time. When you notice the time of year where they're nesting and they're going down into the water and they come up with a stick in their mouth, their next move is to take off. So within 30 seconds, all of a sudden the wings are going to come up and then they're going to take off. How lucky did I get? This is with an 800mm 5.6 with a D810 camera. And the bird just happened to come at the camera. And I had so much resolution and a little bit of cropping power to make an image that will still hold up to a huge print. Down in Miami, I love colors. I love things that make you pop and things that make you think. We'll talk about eye contact in portraits. This is actually shot at the Bronx Zoo with a D7100, which is a DX format camera. Put a 600mm lens on that with a teleconverter, and you have astronomical focal lengths to try to get closer. But this is actually a crop at enough resolution and enough frame to crop this and still have an image hold up at 30x40 or 20x30. That's the one thing I will not give forgiveness on with wildlife photographers or bird photographers. I don't photograph for the web, I photograph for print. You can crop in and be more forgiving and have a lot more forgiveness on the web, but if you really want to talk about the quality of an image, it's not about cropping in for web resolution, it's about cropping in for print resolution. This is down in Florida, a place called Gatorland. Beautiful moments. And this all plays into what I'm going to talk to you about in photographing people, because it's about the interaction between adults and infants, or those moments that will happen. This is an egret chick that just popped up between the legs of its mom in the nest. And again, if you're there, you have the opportunity to catch that. If you're not, then it's going to be tough. Down in Miami, my buddy Ron McGill, one of our ambassadors for Nikon, working with a baby giraffe that came out, just happened to walk under the belly of the mom, and it made for just a beautiful moment. And I try to control the frame that way. It's not about the bigger giraffe, it's about the baby just tucking underneath and making that vertical picture. And typically with those focal lengths, it could be the 80-400, it could be a 70-200, it could be a 500 f4, but I would say my favorite lens right now, the NIKKOR 200-500, is probably one of the easiest to handle out in the field, and especially when I'm trying to focus on birds, tracking them up in the sky. Part of a shoot down in DeSoto Beach in Florida. Yes, sir.
So do you still sometimes prefer to use a DX camera, like you use a 7100?
The question he's asking up here is, do I prefer a DX camera or the full frame? I love them both. I would have probably said I was born for a full frame digital camera just because of focal length and the way I was used to seeing focal lengths. But man, it's a great advantage to have a D500 on a 2-500, which has become pretty much the premier wildlife package in the Nikon world. To have that extra ability. It's not changing the focal length of the lens, as my good friend Lindsay Silverman would say if he's tuning in. It doesn't change any of the physical properties of the focal length, but what it does crop within, you know, the actual angle of view. So the image area appears to be one focal length, 1.4 focal lengths longer than the longest. So having a D500 and the longest focal length of close to 750mm is a great advantage when the birds are further away. You could also flip that math and using a 2-500 on a camera like the D850, where you have more resolution and more crop power. So I've got almost double the resolution there, more than, almost close to double the resolution. So I can actually use that as a mental factor to say, okay, I could shoot a little looser frame, but I can gain it back in the crop in post. Does that make sense? So I go both ways, DX and full frame. D500, you know, does an amazing job, and at 10 frames a second, it's more than enough, you know, for what I'm trying to do in action in sports. But moments, gestures, again, two things, two people, two objects, two animals coming together and creating a moment. the lion and the lioness coming out early morning in Zoo Miami. And then that little snuggle of the head up against the side of the lioness. You know, do you snuggle? Does anybody cuddle? I cuddle. I love cuddling. My favorite movie is The Notebook, in case anybody cares. I'm a sad, stupid, hopeless romantic, but it's not so bad. It's okay. But these moments and gestures, again, will apply to the people that we photograph. So always looking for genuine connection, always looking for the genuine moments, looking for the subtle and strong gestures. To me, one of the most important things is eye contact. We'll talk about that, and you'll see that in the photographs, but you learn a lot about a person with two different things, the hug and eye contact. And if somebody is letting you in, they're going to look at you and they're going to stay with you. If they're a little more cautious about who you are or what you want to be or letting you into their lives for that moment, they're going to turn away very quickly. We talk about passing people in a hallway, right? You're going to walk up to somebody, hey, the big handshake, look them in the eyes, or you can walk right past them with a quick glance and keep going. Yes, sir.
So when you're doing these photos on the fly, are you like trying to predict where to do a single point focus, or are you keep it continuous?
When I'm doing photos on the fly, the question is, do I use a single point and continuous, the focus mode, are you asking? Yeah, so what, I'm using all kinds of different focus modes, but I would say 90% of the time I'm in continuous. And the reason why is because any little subtle movement, when you're using a lens like this amazing 105-1.4, could cripple the photo off the focus point right of the eyes and eyelashes. I will shoot at 9 frames per second, even in portraits, with a single point and continuous. It's called a dynamic focus mode, so it'll do a little bit of tracking. But even with a child or a portrait that I'm making, where they're not moving drastically, just enough could throw it out. Just enough movement can throw it out. So the continuous will actually track a little bit. And I will overshoot. If I have to shoot 20 frames to get one, I will. My father used to chastise me all the time. He used a speed graphic, so I had one picture at a time. I get it. He said, I could have done it in one shot. I get it. But you know what? When you're in a moment and you don't want to miss a moment, and a lot of times if I'm dealing with a cancer patient and the moments are moving very quickly. Anybody photograph children? How quickly they move, how quickly they run around. So I'm using a tracking mode called dynamic, and I use a single point. And I try to really lock in on eyelashes or the eyeball. And sadly, you start to zoom in on the display on the camera, and if it's not sharp, it's not sharp. And there's nothing that is less appealing in a portrait picture than eyes that aren't sharp. You know, if you get the front lead eye sharp and the back eye starts to go out a little bit, it's more acceptable. But I'm looking for that all the time, all the time. Location, lighting, and timing. You know, time of day. When I photograph the Ronald McDonald House, I'm very seasonal about it, so I have to concentrate on where the light may be during the year. How many of you have like a sun app? An app that will tell you where the sun's going to be, where the sun's going to set, the direction of the sun. It's the best simple thing you can get to understand light in a venue, where it's going to go. Yes, sir?
So whenever you're taking a portrait picture of a child and a mother, so if you're using a 1.4 f-stop, so mostly how do you focus so that both the face will be
So there are many times the question revolves around this is, what if you're photographing two people? Well, I totally abandoned 1.4, and I totally abandoned the 105 lens, because unless they're exactly on the same plane, you're going to have an issue. And that's when I'll move to the 24-70, do something a little bit wider, and pick up a little extra depth by going wider. And I'm going to need that for the two people anyway, and I'll probably try to close down a little bit from 2.8 to f4 just to gain a little bit of edge. Yeah, everything in this world of photography is going to play on the factors of how much light do you have, how much ISO can you get away with, how much f-stop can you get away with. You know, I would think that people would buy 1.4 lenses to use them at 1.4. If it's a 1.8 lens, you're going to want to use it at 1.8. But there are times you got to close down just to create a little bit of a safety sharpness net for yourself, and I'll do that frequently. But you'll see, and you'll see it in these portraits, especially when there's two people. I either sacrifice the sharpness of one of those people to focus on the main subject, or I try to get to a position where I'm going to slide and they're more linear and they're more on the same plane. But it's always a luck shot. It really is. I mean, and that's why I shoot quite a bit. And then I decide which lens, as we're just talking about this, the NIKKOR choice, to find the right focal length to cover everything or that situation that I'm trying to do. It's always nice to have a 24-70 zoom, catch a lot of beautiful pictures with that, but the bokeh of the 105 1.4 and the way it just totally destroys, blows that background. When I say destroys, I mean it in a good way. It just totally turns that velvety background into something that's not distracting. And when I'm photographing the Ronald McDonald House, you'll see a lot of colors in the background. There's a lot of distracting elements. There's a lot of framework. There are posters hanging on the wall, and I'm trying to avoid all of that. So people in portraits, again, you want to make people look great. You want to create moments. Back in the days of our old D40, D40X, if you've been around the Nikon world for a while, the D60, I was part of a production team that produced DVDs on digital that would go in the kits. So I have a little bit of directing in the background and production in the background of what I've done through Nikon. And I just look for amazing moments. This was at a wedding that I shot. Anybody know where Massapequa is? My cousin got married. And if they tune into this, I'm sorry, I hate photographing weddings, but I did it. No offense to any wedding photographers out there. It's an amazing business to be in. God bless your patience for being able to do that, especially the pressure of trying to do this thing that happens once in a person's day, and it's a challenge. It's very, very challenging. But I said, okay, I'll do it because it was in a park, and it was one of the coolest weddings I've been to. But this is my niece's son, and he was playing in a sandbox. Actually, it was a volleyball set up on sand, and so you got the white blowing out of the sand. I went a little high key with this, and this is with the 105-1.4. To your point, tack on the eyes. And I tried to distract him and get his attention, and he gave me a bunch of weird looks, and all of a sudden his face settled down. You know, the one thing you have to do is never give up on a situation until the situation changes on you and you have no control over it. Just hang in there a little bit longer. You know, they always say this in baseball. If someone's stealing second base, don't wait for the person to just slide in and stop shooting. Wait for the reaction of the umpire calling them safe or out. Wait for them to pop up and interact or maybe bump into the player that's trying to tag them. All kinds of moments happen after the moment you think is the right one. So always follow through at the pictures. And in this case, it was just being a little more persistent and waiting for that face to just relax. He gave me the goofy face, didn't really work. You know, twitched his mouth a little bit, didn't really work. Curled his lips, didn't really work. And then all of a sudden just settled down, because all I want you looking at are those eyes. I want you to connect with the eyes. And that's where eye contact comes in big time.
Mike, on the prior photo, were you using a speed light or a reflector?
Yes, great question. Backed up to the photo, the question is, was I using a speed light or reflector? A lot of times when we're working with production crews, they're always bringing out different kinds of reflectors. So this is actually one of those metal reflectors that they use that was on the other side of this pool that we were in front of, and I just had an assistant go over and say, do you mind angling that over there? You know, one of the simplest things you could buy here in the store to change your light is bouncing light off of a reflector. And I'm a huge fan of speed lights, and we know that Seth, who is a big part of this, and come back and see his seminars on lighting, will tell you that to control that light is the most important thing. I mean, it's one thing to know light, it's another thing to see it, it's another thing to run for it and it's not there. And if you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, it's just not there. How do you create it out of nothing? And that's where speed lights and strobe units will come in handy. But that is a reflector. This is not. This is all natural light. I'll do a little bit of everything. I've learned speed lights and I've learned to control, but natural light really works. Portraits need to really say something. And I photographed through a group called Rescue Inc. If anybody heard of them, they had a TV show on Nat Geo. Batso. Batso is an amazing guy who was pretty much early on in his years a career criminal and you know, didn't really learn to read or write until later on in life. He married a beautiful woman, 30 years younger than him. She changed his life. He's Buddhist, and he makes soaps and teas, and he and I connected so well. And I would every time I would take the ferry to go see my daughter or son at college up in Connecticut or Boston, I would stop at his house and stop to make photos. We had a personal shoot. I was photographing for their website, and I said, Batso, I need to come out. We did. We went out to the beach, and that's his rescue, Inca. And Inca was attracted to these seagulls, and the flock of seagulls take off, so Inca kind of went with that dark look, that really intense look. Batso just happened to have his face up against Inca, and this is one of those moments that just come together and you're not expecting it. But I just hammered on the shutter and was able to make this shot with a 70-200. And that's probably one of my favorite portrait pictures in that type of environment. But it's the two heads coming together, and it's that gesture and having enough depth of field to cover both of them in that kind of light. It was overcast, which was nice too, not too harsh. I will use a long lens, a 400 millimeter. to shoot portraits in situations. I love environmental portraits and people in those situations. When the D700 came out, I was with a beautiful photographer, Sherry Steinberg, and her husband, Hedley Jones, and we shot in Union Station in Los Angeles. And always a believer in changing the angles to try to see things a little bit differently. So when you do that, you see other things that you didn't see standing up. And you crawl down on the ground, and the older I get, the tougher it is to get up. But it's worth it because you're seeing things at different angles, like the reflections and the balance of the reflection of the bride as she's sitting in Union Station. So this was not a wedding. It was a stage shot. And I just kept walking around to find something a little bit different, and had her sit down on the bench, and that worked out really well. Did a lot of work for these DVDs, and I love photographing children, but letting children be children. There's nothing worse than trying to pose a child that doesn't want to sit for a photograph. And I do this every year, and I bring this up because it's my favorite time of year because I have more laughs inside than anything. I photograph the children of the families of Nikon and their relatives with Santa at Nikon. And while everybody wants that perfect photograph of their child at 1 year old and 2 years old, not crying, you know, not screaming, you know, not afraid of Santa, it's my favorite moment to find the child that screams the most and make that picture for them. Because 20 years from now, that picture is going to be far more funny than just a child sitting there. And it's more humorous, and you take that, you know, when the kid's on his first date or her first date, and you show that picture. But let the children be children. Get down to their level. You hear this stuff all the time, and create images. We always talk about that like minute portrait or 2-minute portrait. Anybody recognize this gentleman? Bobby Flay has Bar Americaine here in New York, at least back a few years back. Working with his horse racing magazine, they said, can you go out and photograph him? He happens to be a horse owner. And I made this picture with basically one speed light. I had a whole light set up outside those doors that you see. And when he was reluctant to have the picture taken in the first place. And there was a thing called a T-Mobile Sidekick. Did anybody ever see that or have one of those? You flipped up the panel and then the keypad was under there, and they came out with a black and white version, then it went to color. He would barely even talk to me. So try to make a portrait that they want for a lead story of somebody that doesn't want to have their picture taken. So I saw him playing with his T-Mobile Sidekick. I ran to my bag, I grabbed mine, I pulled it out and said, hey, how do you do this on here? I had no idea what I was asking. And all of a sudden we had a different kind of connection. I said, well, I need a portrait of you. He said, I don't have a lot of time. I said, well, can I photograph you in the kitchen around? And I promise I'll just be a fly on the wall. I did that. We talk a little bit more. Do you mind going upstairs, or can I just need a lead portrait of you. Okay, I'll give you a couple of minutes. So I went upstairs. I set the lights up outside these doors, over the overhang. It was a beautiful picture. You look down into the restaurant. I couldn't have had a better scenario. He walks upstairs and says, I don't want to be photographed in front of the patrons. Let's go back in this room. I grabbed one speed light off a stand. I dropped it to the side. I held my breath at a 15th of a second and shot about 8 pictures, and it was done. And probably 3 or 4 of them are not tack sharp when you look at the letters on his. I was moving way too fast. But that's what happens sometimes. You have to be prepared for that. My favorite story, 35 years after I graduated high school, I went and found my high school art teacher in Florida. And I promised, this woman, Pauline Jonason, Mrs. Jonason, probably the greatest influence outside my mother and father for the art that I'm in. I took advertising with her. After I finished high school, I went back and taught a black and white photography class for her because they cut the budget, they cut the photo teacher. She said, well, you know more about this than I do. Would you come in and show my students how to do this? And that's how I started teaching while I was in college. But I went back, and she won't stop teaching. She does this whole painting with these gold paints on wood, and started talking to me about this whole process, and it was one of the greatest moments going back to see somebody. I love faces and portraits, and NIKKOR. Anybody know who NIKKOR is? One of my favorite people on the planet. Nick is a person who took a picture. If I asked you to close your eyes and imagine a photograph of a Vietnamese girl running down a block in Vietnam after a napalm explosion, would you recognize that picture? It was a Pulitzer Prize-winning image. Nick took that picture. Anybody know the backstory to that, which makes it even better? Now, I love Nick. I love his eyebrows. I love his beautiful smile. I could kiss that face 1,000,000 times, and I photograph him every time I see him every year at the Eddie Adams workshop or wherever we're together. He actually saved that woman's life. Her name was Kim Fook. She lives, I believe, in Connecticut now. He picked her up, put her in the car, took her to the hospital. They wouldn't treat her. He pulled out his AP badge and said, if you guys don't treat her now, I'm going to let everybody know that you're not treating this young lady. And they saved her life. Nick has probably got one of the biggest hearts on the planet, maybe as big as John White, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist from Chicago. Another person. I love photographing my friends. I hear this all the time. How do you find subjects? I photograph my friends. And I just ask them to do what I need them to do for that time. And I keep going back to them because I know their tendencies, but you all have to be directors. We have to direct them in the photos. And this was just a beautiful moment of gesture in a Marriott hotel when John White came to speak for our ambassadors a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. Great moments, gestures, making him laugh, talking with him, you know, telling jokes, trying to do anything I get to get him to laugh. This guy was in Nelson Mandela's house when Mandela was freed from jail. The history within this man is just unbelievable. He was great friends with Muhammad Ali and covering Muhammad Ali. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, he's great friends with a lot of politicians and spiritual leaders. And he's my spiritual leader. Headley Jones, I mentioned him before, that wedding shoot. This is Headley. I love his face. My good friend Alfredo. So here is where eye contact comes in. I'll actually force people to look into my camera. And I do that, and I try to get them to bear a little bit of their soul with me. Or I try to direct them into a mood. And I actually told Alfredo, give me something that reminds you or gets you feeling like someone just stole your puppy. And give me that intense look. He's from the DR, and he's just a brilliant guy. I photographed him for competition in bodybuilders, but I started doing this thing with the 105 down in the studio at Nikon, and I thought it was so cool to have eye contact and facial hair. So the women at Nikon were pretty aggravated with me because I wouldn't use them in these portraits, but I just wanted that facial hair, that short depth of field, shallow depth of field, and that eye contact, eyelashes and eyeballs to be super sharp. Do a lot of rock and roll photography, and why am I sort of segueing to rock and roll? Because a lot of what I'm doing right now has to have a purpose. So it's portraits with a purpose. How do I spin whatever it is that I'm doing into something that's going to benefit somebody else? I would probably stand up here and be telling you the truth when I say I am probably one of the most blessed individuals to have had a 35-year career with Nikon. By the time I'm done, it'll probably be close to 48 years. And to have Nikon open up doors for me and to learn this business from the inside out, to have really amazing equipment that you're learning with that continues to grow and evolve in technology, so you got your hands on it right away. More than lucky to be a part of all that. So how do I spin that back and make this all count for something? And it's all finally coming together after 35 years of shooting. And I'm actually very pleased, and you'll see that. But I love rock and roll photography. Studied the great people like Lynn Goldsmith and Baron Woolman and Robert Knight. And, you know, rock and roll photography is far different. You shoot a concert? If you're tuning in, have you ever shot a concert before? It's probably one of the most aggravating things that you could ever experience in this day and age. Because long before there were layers of management and legal teams, there was a thought. Baron Woolman told me this. You walk in with a camera and they thought you were with a band. So they basically would handhold you all the way in. Nowadays, you get a 2 or 3 song limit. You're lucky if you can stand in a spot in a pit, but if not, you're at a soundboard or you're wherever they designate you to stand. You are yanked immediately after the last note of the last song that you're allowed to shoot, unless you're working with that band, which is another thing I tried to figure out. How do you get into these people and work with the performers and get the access that you need? But you're living with a bunch of rules that I believe you have to follow. And they can change the rules anytime they want. So if you're prepared with the right lenses for the right situation to photograph in a pit with a 24-70, great. I can't tell you how many times at Jones Beach they push us back to the soundboard, and those people with the 24-70 will get a nice shot of the arena and not get a great performance shot. So you have to always sort of be prepared. And when I go back to the summer in June, the venue in June, I'll always have the 2-500 with me, just in case they push us back to the soundboard. And a lot of the older performers, Rod Stewart, Joan Jett, you name it, if they've been around, James Taylor, you're always shooting from the soundboard, so you have to have a long telephoto lens to counter that. But I love rock and roll. I love the lighting. This is from the soundboard with a 600mm lens. So I'll try to provide or come out with whatever it is I need to try to fill the frame. When you're uptight, a nice 70-200 works out really well. However, last year I created the zoom of a 70-200 to shooting with the 105 and a 24-70 from the pit, because the look of a 105 or a 200 is just phenomenal. Just works out really, really well. Action, moments, remote photography. I've done a lot of it with bands. As I start to get very close to the band, I try to find a way in. This is Pat Monahan of a band called Train. And through the years, I've become very close to the people with Train. And the more you go in, it's kind of like the brotherhood of the fire department. When you're in the family. And when you're in the family and you're trusted, that's the big thing that you need is the trust. They have to trust that you're not going to do anything to make them look ridiculous. Or when you're behind the scenes, you're not going to make a photograph that is a negative that may go out on the wires. So I'm always looking for approval of the pictures that I use. This is Pat Monahan as he's kicking into the camera with a 14mm lens. I had a 14 to 24 on the camera at that point. I love stage lighting, the theatrics of the stage. A lot of the hip-hop artists, Wiz Khalifa brings some of the best light ever. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm going to a show. Rock and roll could be very stale if the lighting is pretty bad. So I've always said that if you photograph and the lighting is great, go find the lighting person and kiss them right on the lips. Because otherwise your pictures would be very boring. I photographed one of the second to last concert of the Police, and the light was so contrasty and stale that you were lucky to get a good picture of Sting. Connected with people like Chris Daughtry and shooting. This is actually with an 80 to 400 at about 350mm in the pit. So looking for different angles, trying to do different things. One Republic light. The light is phenomenal in their stage lighting. A 600mm with Stevie Nicks. I think I was going to marry Stevie Nicks once, a long time ago. One of my favorite performers. Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots. As I evolve through these pictures and move through these pictures, do you notice something happening here? I'm trying to create portraits of live performances while they're on stage. This is back with a 2 to 400mm lens at about 300mm. And when they tell you that you can shoot in a pit, ask for permission to get out of the pit, because a longer telephoto with compression is a far better shot than a shot up somebody's nostrils sometimes. So watch your angles. They had come out, the tour director came out and says, do us a favor, Scott. Scott had a drug habit. He didn't like cameras being pushed in his face. It's very common in rock and roll to take a super wide angle lens and hold it up and try to get this dynamic wide angle look. As soon as they said that, I said, well, the heck with this. I don't want to intimidate him. I want a good picture, and stepped out and shot at a longer focal length. And I just got lucky with him looking into the camera. But I'm always looking for that portrait look in rock and roll. Behind the scenes, some of the wackiest things that nobody gets to see. A washer and dryer for the band Nickelback. And you know what? If you're not Nickelback, you can't use the washer and dryer. Because if you're the first act of 3, you're washing your clothes in a sink somewhere. Because you don't even get a room to stay in. You don't get a green room. You roll your trunks in, you open your trunks, whatever hallway they put you in the back venue, back areas of this venue, that's where you are. And as you move up to be the feature act, you get the green room with the green M&Ms, you get the beer, whatever you want, pizza, the best, finest foods, the best, finest catering, and you are taken care of. That's the hierarchy, and that's what this picture represents. And then I started to get very frustrated. Anybody ever photograph a drummer on stage? Any drummers out there? Because I love drummers, all the way in the back. I love drummers. I love drummers because I love what a drum does in the way of our heart and soul, right? If you hear a drum pounding very quickly, what does it do? It gets your adrenaline going and you start to move faster. If it slows down, the drummer controls the beat and the pace of our life. That heartbeat, that movement. But drummers are always in the back of the stage, right? Typically, unless you're Jason Bonham in the Led Zeppelin Experience and you're in the front. And as a 5'5" person in a pit, I can't see the drummer. I have an issue with angles, and I have a problem with that. So I thought about it, and you can see it here in the picture. You see that camera right in front of Ryan's face? I'm not the first person to ever think about this. People using video and lipstick cameras for a long time to get in there, and I was like, what if I could put a D3 in there? What if I could mount one D3 and try to create a hero shot of a drummer? You ever see a pilot that puts a wide-angle lens, turns it back at themselves in a fighter jet with a 16mm fisheye, and you get this beautiful shot of all the blue sky and the canopy behind them, and it's a hero shot. I wanted to try to do that with a drummer. So I started working with a drummer called Daniel Adair. But this is typical of what I do these days in setting up what's called these drum remotes for a project I have called Drummer Love. And I mount them with super clamps and magic arms and anything I do to get the cameras in a position to shoot not only the drummer now, but actually shoot the stage from behind and the front people from behind. And this is one thing that started off as a catastrophic failure, and it actually has turned into something where I started with one camera. Now I've used up to 9 cameras around a drum kit if I can get my hands on them. And the more you shoot and the more angles you cover off, the more opportunity, and I haven't gotten it yet, but for all 9 cameras to shoot an epic picture at the same time, and then I'm going to do one big shot, one panel with all 9 of those frames, or however many cameras I have. I haven't really nailed that yet, but there are a lot of opportunities here to do some amazing things, and I became friends with a drummer of a band called Nickelback, Daniel Adair, worked with them on a Dark Horse tour, and I asked if I could actually put a camera on the drum kit. They said, well, we're going to have to ask the drummer. We've never heard that question before. And Daniel happened to be a Nikon photographer, and he jumped all over that and said, that's the coolest thing ever. And he said, nobody ever pays attention to me. You know, they're always paying attention to the front performers. And I said, well, this is a perfect opportunity, and I can teach you a little bit about photography if you give me the access. Yes, sir.
So when you have those couple cameras around the drummer, is it one clicker that snaps all of the photos?
Yes.
You have them synced up?
Excellent question, and I was going to get there, but let's go there anyway. The question is how am I firing off these cameras? Nikon has a WR system with a remote now that plugs into the front of the camera. It's a tiny little remote, the WR10, with an adapter to 10A. And I actually hooked that up to my main shooting camera that I'm shooting by hand. When I trip this camera, it fires all the remotes. And early on, I used whatever remote device I could to trip the cameras. But when you have something in your hand like this, and you're trying to do this and shoot the band in the front at the same time, how does a catastrophic failure happen? I hooked this to my vest, and when I went to go photograph Daniel the very first time, it was off my vest. I dropped it. I had no remotes. So what I had to do was, fortunately, the security, always respect security, found it, gave back to me later on, but I missed his solo. And so you put all that effort in, you tell everybody you're going to do it, big mistake, because everybody's waiting to see the pictures. But one camera triggers all the remotes, or, this has gotten even better, my daughter now comes with me. I give her the handheld remote, and I just tell her every time the drummer makes an epic move, fire that off. And she's gotten so good at it, I swear to God, she shoots better than I do. She knows the beat, she knows the song, she knows the tempo, and that's all she needs. But I work with Daniel. This is one of those moments where I got up there and said, brother, I'm going to miss your solo. I have no remote. I can't fire it off. And he got funny. He started firing off the camera, but it just, you know, it wasn't the right pictures. But we came back the second week. They were actually going from Long Island to Hartford a week later. I said, can I do this one more time? We go out to Hartford, and now I got his input as to where he will fire that stick the most. And he says, I'm always pounding on the China cymbal. I said, that's good, because I don't know what a China cymbal is, but you have to learn these things if you want to play in the game, right? And the China cymbal is up to stage right. And he says, I do this all the time, all show long. I come over here and bang it up and down. And he loved this picture enough. And he says, I love this picture. Why do you think he loves this picture? Because he says, my bicep looks so good. And he sent it to an Australian drum magazine and sold the picture for me. So it's a different angle. Drum magazines haven't really seen a lot of this kind of stuff unless someone's walking on the stage. And no offense to any photographer, you got that gig and you're working with a band, you can get on the stage, great. But I always think of two things. One, someone can see my ass while I'm up on stage if I'm turned to the audience, and they don't pay $200 a seat to look at me, distract them from the performers. So this is a safe way of not being seen. I'm always wearing black up on stage, so my black shoes, black pants, shorts, a black t-shirt, so I can blend into all of the dark areas. But it just got epic from that same shoot in Hartford. From that same position, Daniel rears back. I have more people telling me, wow, how did you get that sweat to fly like that? And that's not sweat. That's pyro going off in the background. So you know, everything comes together, and you're kind of blessed with all the elements working, and it works around the frame. He rears back to fire that stick on the drums. He turns his head back with emotion, which you love, the impact, the energy, the emotion, and it all comes together. So how do I make this all work for me? I've done this probably now about 27 to 30 times with different drummers, and some of the drummers I've done over and over and over again. And it kind of dawned on me when I started working at the Ronald McDonald House that I've done a lot of great promotional work for these people, and if they go commercial, they have to pay for it. But I love doing this, but how do I get it to pay off for the house? So now every drummer that I work with has to make a donation to the Ronald McDonald House or they don't get the pictures. It's a clear-cut deal up front. And I took it to another level because it just kind of dawned on me that, you know, they're getting something from me. I don't need anything in return. How can I spin this over to the house? And some of the biggest bands like Train, Shinedown, Nickelback have all made donations to the house. Even if I'm photographing someone just coming in, a really, really amazing guitarist that I photographed recently, Noah Jessup, first album cut, he came in and he made a $300 donation to the house. So that's how I can pay back at this stage. And working with these different drummers from the different bands, trying to get them connected socially. My friend Ryan Birdie jumps at the end of every show. Got lucky that the gels and the lights were going off at the same time. 16 fisheye typically, sent away to metering, 2/3 stops down. I came up with this formula. It just seems to work, and I use it every time. And I will ask the drummer what color shirt they're wearing, so if I have a camera that's in tight, I don't want the camera to be full because I'm in aperture priority. I can't move fast manually. I can't make any changes once I set those cameras, and I'm so much better off letting the cameras do what they're designed to do and run the way they will. Madison Square Garden here with Billy Joel's drummer, Chuck Berge, one of the happiest people I have ever met. Tommy Lee did something very cool. He would play on roller coaster tracks and play upside down. And I took the gig and saying, you know, this Tommy Lee wants you to do this with them. Live Nation reached out and I said, okay, great. You know, he plays upside down. And now I'm thinking safety cables. What if a camera falls? I got to make sure everything's locked down. I only have a limited time because they were playing just before Kiss. I was actually told on set that if you don't get your cameras off this kit fast enough, we're going to throw them to the side. You're working with all those variables. But the biggest one was, how do you prove that he's upside down? If I start with a camera mounted with him that goes with him, it's always going to be right side up, right? Well, fortunately, they bring a ride along, so there's a woman with red hair that's hanging upside down. And just while he was up there, they splashed the audience with light in the middle of a sequence that we were shooting. And that's how you make it work. I had no idea how we were going to prove this picture worked, and then Drumhead magazine picked it up. And then Tommy Lee tweeted about it, and it was great. So again, how do I tie this all together and make this pay off? And I don't even know. I don't want to count the number of dollars going to the house. I just want to make sure they go to the house. If you've ever worked with a charity before like this, you always have to think about the variables that are not obvious. How many rolls of toilet paper do they go through a week? How many meals do they have to cook each week, 3 times a day? A lot of volunteers that come in and do that work. So, you know, what is it that I can do to give back? And Nikon has a program called Flash. It's our community outreach program. So we work with the Ronald McDonald House and the Sunrise Summer Camp. One of the coolest things I've done in my career was help design and build a cabin. So instead of doing arts and crafts, the kids come in, they grab a camera, they go out and shoot a quick assignment, and by the time they go home, they go with a folder of pictures. Instead of doing finger painting, they're actually making pictures. So they'll get an assignment to go out and photograph green, or they'll get an assignment to photograph a tree, or photograph your friend jumping, some kind of sports action type thing. And they'll go out in pairs and they'll work with the cameras and shoot. And 2 really great gentlemen from Huntington High School, retired teachers now, actually run the program for us. I did the first year and it was so difficult between Nikon and the camp. But they go there and they do several sessions a day and they give up their time, and they're amazing gentlemen. So the Ronald McDonald House came along when Nikon said, would you go photograph portraits of the children? So here we get back into the core of what we're doing here and the portraits that I've gotten involved with. And this is where my life took a very severe turn for the better. And I made some changes along the way when I started going to the house because I went in with the wrong attitude, and I'll explain all that. But I was asked to every 2 times a year photograph in the spring and photograph in the fall, just before the holidays for, you know, possibly Christmas or New Year's or Thanksgiving, and in the spring when we come into the warmer weather. And the idea was to start taking pictures to just change the attitude of the day. Maybe they're over in the hospital taking care of a child. Maybe a child's just gone through surgery. Maybe somebody is rehabbing in the house. They're back and forth between the Children's Hospital, the Cohen's Children's Hospital next door, and the Ronald McDonald House. Sometimes they have to travel into the city for specialists. And you'll meet some of these people here because Callie, Dylan, Bailey. Actually, Bailey, a young lady I've been photographing, just went through surgery on Tuesday and in a lot of pain. But well, I'll tell her story. Just so many beautiful, beautiful children. And Callie to Kaylee to another Keela that I photographed. And it's hard to remember all the names, but damn it, I'm going to work hard to make sure that I know them all. Because when I first went in, the mistake I made was trying to break the emotion from it, not really being connected to these kids at all. I didn't want to know what they were sick from because I was afraid I was going to have to learn that somebody was not going to make it. And I kind of kept my distance. I didn't want to know what the prognosis was. And I went in there to make pictures, and it was a beautiful thing. Digital photography is a wonderful thing when you're photographing a child who may not want to have their picture taken, and then you show them the back of the camera, and all of a sudden they light up, and they want more, show me more, take more. And so, you know, I tried to learn how to connect with the children, and I made some really great connections, but I didn't really do the job that I was supposed to do. And the one thing that kind of struck me is something that I mentioned earlier is how do I photograph these sick children and give them, make them look dignified? Dignity was a big thing. Every one of us has mentors, right? When I really started to immerse myself in this, I called two people, Deanne Fitzmaurice, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and one of my favorite people on the planet, journalist Amy Vitale. And I know they've worked in situations like this before, in crisis and in turmoil. And I said to him, I said, how do I approach this? How do I do this? I ran into situations already where there was a moment where I should have had the camera up, or maybe I shouldn't have. I don't know whether I should have, I shouldn't have. The first word you throw is dignity up into your brain and say, would that person or that child look dignified in the end result? And when I was actually asked by one of the moms to take pictures behind the scenes, in the house, in the hospital, in their home, you're always looking for those moments that you don't want to shoot and not shoot with the camera. And you'll see I put the camera down quite a bit. So again, these are some okay portraits, I think. I don't think they have a lot of life, but the parents love them, the kids love them. I did the job. Is it okay to just do the job, or do you have to go a little bit further? But you start to use the props around the house. This is what I would call a run and capture type situation. They're moving around the house, they're running very quickly. They're moving towards your camera, they're running the tables. You can't hold them down, but I think you also create more genuine moments when they're actually moving. Now the beautiful thing about the house is that it's a glass ceiling on top, so the light comes through really nicely in the spring, not so nice in the winter. And we usually were doing these at about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So a lot of times in the winter or fall shoots, there was no light at all. So you had to use a speed light to compensate for that. But the natural light is always the better way to go. And just trying to change things up with the zoom lens. I use the two lenses right here, the 105 and the 24-70. When a child sits in their place and they're not moving much, I'm immediately jumping to the 105 because I know I can go for a much tighter frame. But if they start to get up and run around, the 105 becomes less effective, and the 24-70 gives me a little more safety angle to cover them off.
Is the 105 prime?
105 is a prime, yes. It's a 105 fixed 1.4.
What is the f-stop on that?
1.4. Yeah. I know my friend Taylor Glenn was just admiring that lens, and he said he was going to purchase it from the store before he left tonight. Right, Taylor? Taylor, T-A-Y-L-O-R, Glenn, G-L-E-N-N. One of the best nature landscape people I know. And he lives in the heart of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Look at his stuff. But photographing these children, there's a little speed light action, shoot through umbrella, speed light on top. Sometimes I have a friend from Nikon that comes along and they hold up the light for me, so I'm not jumbling around. Putting light stands on the floor in the main room, they call it, sometimes could be a hazard. You don't want kids to trip over them. So you're always constantly looking for the safety factors. And no matter what you do, I swear to God, this is a true story. The last shoot we just did for the spring, I had photographed one of these children. Sometimes you're photographing 3 families, sometimes it's 8. The last time we were in there were 10 families that signed up, you know, or someone's going to see that you're shooting and say, what's going on? Nikon's shooting free pictures? Great, I want a piece of this. Can I take my child up? We'll stay there as long as it takes. I had photographed this little girl who was 3 years old, and the mom kind of lost sight of her, and she crawled up underneath me while I was shooting somebody else, and I started to go down on top of her, and I ended up flipping over the top. I saw her, and the 105-14 crashed right into this finger, snapped the lens hood off, and it was a tough situation. It kind of threw me for the rest of the shoot. But I hung in there and shot, and you always have to think about the safety factors when you're together. You have to think about their health and what it is they can and can't do. You can't get them to lay on a couch and put their head a certain way if their head won't go that way, or they just had surgery on their spine. So you always have to find out what those things are that they're going through. And sometimes it's a sibling of a sick child, so it's not always a sick child, and you're trying to keep them occupied while you're going. So it's trying to find that connection. This little young man would not look towards the camera until we showed him the display. He got to see his face, and then all of a sudden he was a ham for the camera. And you try to make them feel special, and you try to make them feel precious, and just look for those moments. And this is the first young man I started really connecting with and said, I got to stop this emotional. I want to know what's going on in his life. I want to know what it's like to be him. I want to know what his favorite things were. And I immediately jumped on the fact that he was wearing a Knicks hat. And do you like basketball? Yeah, but I just got the hat because we went to a game. And we started talking about basketball. And you could clearly see what he's going through. He's going through facial reconstruction. And it's surgery after surgery after surgery, which started a long time ago for him. And that's when you start to feel your heart open up and you say, wait a minute, what I'm doing here is far more important than just photographing pictures in the spring and the fall. And I've always felt like there's never a time frame when I want to have this happen. We have to do this whenever they need me, not when I need them, or not when we want to go in, or not when it's scheduled. Their life and their timing is far more critical than mine. And then you start to realize what the afflictions are that they have. And you start to ask questions like, I see this tube constantly. What is that tube? It's a feeding tube. When these children start at such a young age, you know they don't know how to eat, so they have to go through eating therapy when they are allowed to eat a little bit later on. And as tough and emotional as it can be, one thing that you remember is the attitude at the house is to always laugh. And the attitude is to always bring a smile. You want to cry? Go out back, get in your car, go cry. I've done that a number of times. But when you're there, you have to be the happiest person on the planet. So I become a 12-year-old, sometimes a 4-year-old. And they're more mature than I am. And that's typical, as my friends know. But I become their pal, and we start roughhousing and playing around on the floor. So I talked about impact, energy, and emotion. And I just want to grab you back again and remind you that it's not always about a high-impact action shot. It's about a moment. It's about an expression. And I believe this picture has impact because it may draw you in very quickly. I think it's got so much energy from that smile that she has. And the emotion certainly is drawn out as well. So bring these things together, the elements together, and start to dig in. I've met so many beautiful people through the years. Kaylee, at 4 years old, she's now 7 years old. And when you see these children start to grow up in front of you, you feel special about being a part of their lives. And you connect with the family. If you guys are out there, Tiffany, somewhere viewing, I started to then feel a heart for not just the children, but their parents and what they're going through. And asking questions about what's happening, what are you doing next, where are you going for the next treatment. Finding out things like I have to reapply for medication every 30 days because the insurance is becoming very difficult to work with. Understanding their struggles and photographing them with their children, and it's an amazing thing to watch these children grow. And looking for the props and make them smile, and you meet the grandparents and you become a part of their family, and there's no turning back because you want to know what's going on. But you still want to make those beautiful pictures that everybody's happy. Nikon has a studio in Melville. Every once in a while, if a child is healthy enough or they're finished with a procedure, we will bring them to the studio and just make pictures. Miss Sassy Pants is exactly what this little girl is. But you could see she's starting to grow. And I ran into them several times, and I know when they're coming back, and if they do come back, I'm looking to make these pictures. And those eyes are just gorgeous. They're beautiful. And you can see the change in the age. As we come to this picture, she was back to have her apparatus checked. And one of the most remarkable things I found out about this young lady is we share the same disease called Chiari. It's a brain malformation. And I was diagnosed with it a year ago. You talk about serendipity. About 9 of the families and the children that I photograph have the same condition. It's a pretty amazing thing. Peyton, I just saw Peyton on Saturday at the walk. This is Peyton last year. And so growing with him. Peyton was born at 1 pound, 5 ounces. So is her sister in that same range. They were preemies. And they carry that with them every day. And they have to be watched. But that's one of the most beautiful smiles and energies that I've ever seen. Again, you're seeing the background blown out, a lot of 10514 or a longer telephoto when I can get away with it. Marianne is their mom. And we just talked again on Saturday, and I find out how they're doing. And ironically, my daughter is now working at NICU in Stony Brook and deals with a lot of preemie babies. So it all comes back together. It all circles around. So when you become a part of their world, you start to learn more about what's going on in their life. ladies, imagine you're a 21-year-old and you had your head shaved for a surgery and someone comes up to you and says, sir. Makes a mistake, an honest mistake, not a malicious mistake, but it crushes you, right? So I was talking to Bailey, Bailey's mom, Brenda. This is Bailey who had surgery on Tuesday. And I was talking to the mom. She said she was devastated. And so was I. Because right away I went into this overdrive and said, give me 5 minutes with her and I'll prove to her why she's still beautiful without hair. And what is it that would draw you in about her that you would start to focus in on, no pun intended? Is the beauty of her eyes, right? Now imagine you got this beautiful light coming up above, nice soft light, little clouds. Even when the clouds come in the glass ceiling of this main room at the Ronald McDonald House, and we just went to town shooting pictures. And I shoot in color, but sometimes I'll transition to black and white very quickly. I wanted to tell the story of Bailey through her eyes, and she was more than cooperative. And we had such a great time during the shoot. You know, we had some great laughs, but this is probably one of the favorite portraits of all time that I've shot at the Ronald McDonald House. And if that doesn't prove to Bailey, which I believe it does, and I hope she's coming out of her surgery well right now, that she was more than beautiful without hair. Hair doesn't make you beautiful. It's your attitude, and those eyes were just stunning. But it's funny how they all come together. You see these other two beautiful ladies, Caroline and Isabel? They have Chiari as well. Days after this picture, their heads were shaved for surgery. But they're asking to have their picture taken because they want to be dignified. And they want to play with me, and they want to connect. So again, getting involved changed everything for me because now I'm shooting more, I'm moving around the house more, I'm looking for more opportunities. Hayden has the same thing I have. You connect with them. I learn more from their parents, their moms, than I've actually learned from doctors about the situation I'm in. They become this really tight bond of friends that will never end. And when you least expect it, your world changes. In the middle of this shoot with Bailey coming in, a woman named Teresa walked up to me and said, I really feel bad. We missed one of your portrait sessions. When are you going to do another one? I said, just say the word and I'll start shooting. Well, Dylan's upstairs. I said, well, go get him. Introduce me to him. And that's where a little bit of panic set in first seeing Dylan, because it's very rare for you to walk up to a child at his age, 5 years old, that has no hair, no eyelashes, and no hair to be seen because of the massive amounts of chemotherapy he was going through. So the 105-14, that's when I started to reach out to Amy and Deanne. What do I do here? The first thing Deanne said was put down the cameras. Don't even photograph them. Create a rapport with them. With Dylan, it was very tough, and I know he's going to be tuning in. So Dylan, this is a true story and you know it. I wasn't allowed to play with his toys. I was not allowed to go up to his room. I was not allowed to stand in front of a TV in the main room. If I did, you would get thrown into Dylan's jail, which was fine by me. I actually enjoyed that. But I tried to do everything to satisfy what he didn't want me to do. And then all of a sudden, will you play with me? Well, yeah, but I need to touch your toys. Well, he pulls out the crappiest toy and gives me that one. He keeps the big one and the new one. But that was my way in. And then we started fighting like superheroes. And now we can't get together without actually wrestling before we take pictures. But I put the cameras down. We put Legos together. I would hold the instructions. He would tell me when I wasn't holding them the right way. And he would build them very quickly. And all of a sudden, you get invited to his room. And you start connecting with him. And you find that beautiful smile. And you look for the touching moments. Remember, moments, gestures, opportunity to make pictures that are strong. And, you know, one thing I will say, too, is I did have a hard time even posting his pictures until I realized they meant donations to the house. That's the power of these pictures. That's the power of this portrait photography, is it's bringing in revenue to the house. And they use these pictures all the time on banners and tablecloths and social. Most of my pictures are up on social at the Ronald McDonald House Facebook page. But I came up, you know what Dylan's doing right now? He gets a lot of gifts of Legos. He's waiting to open up the next new package of Legos. You wait for these expressions. You wait for these moments. That's the first time I was allowed in his room to actually make pictures of him. And I went up there with the healing dog, Rico Lockwood. They have several healing dogs. And Rico is, I see Rico all the time. Beautiful black lab, two beautiful owners. And they're in there all the time. And, well, the dog can come up to the room. And his mom said, well, can Mike come too? Oh, yeah, Mike can come. just don't stand in front of the TV, which I got yelled at within the first 5 minutes. But he started putting the Legos together. We run around the house and we play hide and seek. A week later, Batman was coming. So he was actually hiding from Batman. He loves his superheroes. Batman is his favorite superhero. And he runs around the gym that's at the Ronald McDonald House. And he's standing in doorways. And you're just standing there constantly ready to shoot because there's a moment about to happen. And this is where I say within the fundamentals, we talked about shutter speeds before, make sure you have the right shutter speed, something that's going to freeze the action like a 500th of a second, or whatever it is you can get away with in that environment. Jack the ISO up exactly the way you need to for that particular, have all of those variables ready, so when the moments are there, you're not thinking about your camera settings, you're absolutely shooting. Just a touch of Batman's, his finger on the top of the head. I've had a lot of feedback about what a genuine moment this is in a shot that they love and the house loved because it was that. I kind of wish Batman wasn't smiling, but it was still a genuine moment. But that interaction between the two of them, talking to them, who gets to eat pancakes with Batman? Dylan does. And there are good times and there are bad times, and you try to do your best to focus on those things, not overcook them sometimes, not overdo it. And the interaction with his mom, Teresa, she's just a beautiful woman, and I know she's out there listening. And we try to stay connected as often as we possibly can. Little gestures, the hands on the head, his hand up underneath his chin, waiting for these moments to happen. Then he grabbed my camera on the table and started looking through the pictures. So that's another way I can sit down with him and talk to him about him, show him how to zoom in. This is with the D5. Show him how to move from one picture to the next. But I never show him how to erase the pictures because I'm afraid he's just going to tap that button once too often and throw something away. And then we have set shoots, and again, it just changed my world. And his mom basically had one thought when she asked me to do this. And I thought it was the most brilliant thing in the world. And that's where I committed to doing it. I want him to see what he was going through at this stage in life, at 5 and 6 years old. And that's the book we'll put together when he graduates high school or college. I said, but if I'm in, I got to be all in. If I'm doing this, I need to be at his first day at school. I need to be in the house at times, the hospital at times. It's not going to be easy, but we got to be able to do this. And she was more than willing and able to work this out. And we walked into the Children's Hospital, Cummins Hospital, and I went in there with a camera and tried to be discreet. And quite honestly, it was a lot easier than I thought. Some places are going to be difficult when you pull out a camera. Some places will just trust you. And because I was with Dylan, they did. This was Dylan holding on to the sheet, waiting for the very first shot that his mother was going to give him. And they call it a pokey. That's what his nickname is for the shot. They have to give him medication without having to go to the hospital, and his mom does that all the time. So this was a nurse's aide that came in and guided her through the process of giving him the shot. It was not a fun moment to be around. The screaming, the crying, but man, he's a trooper. He just did a video of how he takes his own medicine now that she's posted socially. Why is she posting these things? To bring awareness to his cancer. He's got neuroblastoma, and fortunately, he's in a good position right now, but if the cancer comes back, it's so aggressive, there may not be treatments, which is why he has to do all of these preemptive treatments right now that are very difficult with a lot of different medications. We play hide and seek. We run around corners together. He tries to hide from me. I'm waiting on the other side. It's just a game. It's a cat and mouse game. I get invited to the hospital. One day, I actually said to his parents, I said, why don't you guys get out of here? I'll stay with him. And it turned out that he ended up babysitting me. And we stole chocolate from his mother's bag and, trying to slip that in and just do anything I can to make him happy and create reaction. What's happening right now? His mom came back very quick before we thought she was coming back, and he had a handful of chocolate chips in his hand. So he immediately went in to cover them up, and I was just right there to shoot it. He had a moment where he had an accident, and mom had to shower him. One of those moments again. Where's the dignity in taking a picture of him in the shower? None. So I actually put the cameras down and I helped her, brought her towels, changed things out, took the buckets of dirt away, and his body in change of temperature, goes into a really, really tight position. It hurts. It hurts him. It burns. But I'm not going to overdo these types of pictures. But his apparatus that he wears full time, or used to, now he doesn't anymore, so they can easily get the medications in and out. There's all things that you learn. Him having to take his own medicine. Again, very reluctant to do that, very scared. Catch those moments. You're telling Dylan's story, and you're trying to do it in a dignified way. And then eventually he's got to do that for himself. Good days, bad days. Detail shots, you learned this before. Everything is about the detail shot sometimes. Him working with the pads that connect to his body on his own, repositioning them, and then taking medicine. For some reason, just the glow of the light made me immediately switch back to color, because I'm either shooting in color or black and white. I'm tending to not convert in black and white in post, because I just want to see what the picture will look like. Why am I shooting in black and white? I think it creates a mood. Sometimes the light is horrible. The colors are horrible, and you have to live with that. So black and white and high contrast seem to work a little bit better. And I use the filtering system within our picture control, where you can choose red, green, orange, and yellow, and a lot of times go for a little high key by using the red filter. It doesn't give it an infrared look, but it definitely gives it a little bit of an edge in the look in black and white. Notice something about this picture? When you follow a story and you continue to follow it, the eyelashes are starting to grow back. And that's where you start to really focus on details and tell a story about the hair growing back on his head. Most gorgeous eyes I've seen, you know, in a long time. But you run through the gamut of, I'm gonna come into the room, he's gonna beat me first with something. Let him get it out of his system, and then he's gonna sit down and play Legos, and that's when I start taking pictures. We'll go to the toy store, we'll spend days out. On this particular day, we went to the Shake Shack and got a couple of burgers. And by the end of the day, he's just tired, fatigued, and this seemed to work. This beautiful area in the house, light coming in from the outside. He just laid down, and it was a nice moment. This wasn't a sad, sick moment. But this is what it always starts with. Notice more hair. And they're back at the house. They're actually going to go back tomorrow night. And he's going to go through more procedures at the Children's Hospital. His first birthday, they allowed me to come, not his first birthday, the first birthday after he got out of the Ronald McDonald House. They celebrated his 5th birthday at 5.5 years. Batman showed up. First day of school, following the story, trying to make these pictures and growing with Dylan and becoming his best friend, or trying to be. And first day of school just didn't work out real well. He was nervous, but grabbed my hand, let's go upstairs, grabbed his dad, took me into the room. They actually allowed me to shoot in the room. I'm willing to go as far as I can go until somebody says stop. And I'm not going to be obnoxious about it. And the first time they say stop, I'm done. I don't want to push beyond that. But the teachers were nice enough to let me shoot and continue to shoot as we're walking through the halls, walking up, and his first time ever sitting behind a desk in kindergarten. And he's been in and out of school now. It's a very difficult thing, but detail shots of him holding his father's finger. And I'm using a variety of lenses here, but again, just the 24-70 and the 105 tend to be my prime portrait lenses. Dylan is 30 pounds and very small. He's constantly wearing a brace. He was running through the house, fell, and it hurt. And he was not in a good mood. So there are times and moments where I'll just take a cupcake and I will shove it in my face. And I'll do something ridiculous just to get him to relax a little bit. And that was the one thing that brought him out of whatever he was in the way of depression, and went right to the source of his happiness. Because now we were playing together with and of course his mom hates me when I do this, sorry Teresa, but it's childish, but it works. And we have a good time with it. So now Dylan, one of his best friends at the house is Callie. Callie, I know you're watching now, and Amber, her mom. Callie just stole my heart immediately. She has a disease called Faces, P-H-A-C-E-S. Tumors have been growing inside her face since birth. And you'll see a before and after picture that her mom sent me, and it's amazing. But sadly, 2 weeks ago when they went to the hospital, the tumors are starting to grow on the other side of the face. So that means forever surgeries, constant surgeries. It's really never going to end until they find a way to eliminate them from growing back. But you can clearly see the black and blues, the swollen face. Every time she comes in, she has a surgery. She had one a few weeks back, and I'm at the house like within seconds. I just have to find time to get over there. And we spend a lot of time, you know, taking pictures. I mentioned my daughter before. She's on the right side of the house there. She'll come out with me a lot because she loves children and she wants to be a part of all of this. But you're waiting for moments, and Callie around the house, just like I photograph a lot of the children now, and just looking for the cleaner backgrounds. I'm always looking at the backgrounds. I'm always trying to find opportunities, but it's not always going to work out. But that light from the window is just gorgeous, the light coming in overhead. Sometimes it's a bit hot and contrasty, and I work around that, but sometimes it works to help light up her eyes, which is really nice. But the energy she brings makes many of my friends seem ridiculous at how boring and lazy they can be. as she's prancing around the house because she doesn't become nearly depressed about what she's going through than other people who are looking at her. And that is her challenge in life. When someone on the outside or another child is looking at her and makes a comment, and how many times they, with no thought whatsoever, go, or ugh, or something that, you know, makes her feel really bad. However, the pictures change all of that. And I know she's looking in because we're going to make her a little model. We're going to actually get her to hopefully some more photo shoots. And I photographed her now at least a dozen times. That's Rico, the healing dog. She's got dogs at home. So you look for those moments to connect. You lay down on your belly, change the angle. You do whatever it takes. And of course, you try to document the friendship that they have. So 20 years from now, when they're together and they see what they've been through, they have pictures to go back through. Then another friend comes along named Zofia, who has brain cancer. And her mother, Safrana, allows me now to come into their world. They've got a grandmother as a full-time care. Safrana's trying to hold a job, bring in money, get to the house. Imagine you had a day like that, and it is her every day. They're at the house at least 2 or 3 times a month for treatment. She's going through chemotherapy right now, so there are times she will and won't have hair. This is where I learned about feeding tubes and the therapy that children will have to go through, and trying to make the best pictures of Zoe I possibly can. The one thing that I found is pretty amazing, and her mom knows this because I attack her mom for using the cell phone all the time because she owns an Nikon camera, so I'm teaching her how to shoot pictures of Zoe more effectively, and showed her how SnapBridge works to get the pictures to a phone. So she has a high-res picture, and she has the pictures that she can put up on social because they're constantly socializing, and how we've connected through photography and the badgering that I have no problem giving her if she ever pulls out the phone. But looking for great moments, and you can see what I've learned over the time since I've met Zoe is how she is evolving. As she's going through different treatments, she kind of zones out. But now all of a sudden, she connects. And I will say it publicly on live stream to you guys that this weekend, Zoe came running up to me. She must have held me for about 60 seconds as I turned to her mom and screamed, "Why are you not taking this picture?" And by the time she got a camera out to take the picture, it was gone. Sorry, Safrana, I called you out. But that is how we go together. And now Amber, who's up in Syracuse, who's Safrana's friend, is now going to give me a text that says I'm a really bad person for doing that. But I will follow Zoe, and I will continue to follow her as long as her mom allows me to. And the connection that they have, and you'll get to see a picture of her mom and grandmother. And she's a precious little girl with some beautiful emotion. Best friends with Callie. When they're together or apart, they're calling for each other constantly. And Vampirilla was her favorite character of that particular time. So I try to work with the things that they love and get to know them. This was during Christmas. We did a special photograph, a photo shoot for the holidays and Christmas. You talk about moments. This is a moment where she had fallen, and her mom picks her up, and I just happened to have the camera up, and as soon as her mom kissed her forehead, it's just so genuine, and that's what I'm talking about when it comes to the genuine moments. And they try to pose them on the couch for me and say, "Can you please take this picture?" Not so much a portrait as it is a snapshot, but they want the picture, and photographing them all together at the same Christmas shoot that we had, and constantly going back for Callie every time she comes back to the house. And I want to just keep making pictures of them. You get there, you meet somebody else. Little Maria. Maria has the same thing, or similar to what Callie has with tumors. All of this was gone. They had to reconstruct all of it. A big, big change. Some of the surgical procedures they have now are amazing. And this was from the last spring session, going back and photographing Callie again. Some beautiful, beautiful people, and I'm so addicted to doing this. Can you see how Dylan has grown up just a little bit here? And now we got Zoe again, a different time, different place, trying to connect with her and make these pictures. Little gestures like Zoe constantly tweaking her mom's nose. Grandmother doesn't like that. I think it's funny, and I have no problem when Zoe comes up and does it to me. But precious moments between the two of them is what I'm looking for. I'm seeing this young man evolve in just a year and a half of photographing him that I never thought was possible, and he's just growing up so well. They become friends. They become connected, and you try to be there to capture it all. When they say hello, when they say goodbye. Pals. They're pals. This is a moment when Callie was going back up to Syracuse, and she was leaving Zoe. And I wish I was a little lower, but that angle doesn't bother me either. I work with the campaigns that the house is trying to run and shoot as many pictures as I can for them. Can you see that little picture of Callie there on the upper left? That is where it started, and this is where she is now. So we've made some tremendous leaps in medical technology to try to do this, but it is a never-ending procedure for her. Last time I was out there, she put her chef's outfit on. We had tea time, and I had to snap pictures in the middle of tea time, which is great. And this is Keela, who I met when she was with Callie the last time as well, just a beautiful little girl. This is from the walk on Saturday, so it never ends. This Saturday or Sunday is a car wash for Dylan. I have to find out if they're actually going to be there in Hicksville, New York, so I can go there and make pictures. The clown nose becomes the thing. She won a clown nose in a little toss. She was throwing things into a barrel, and she wanted to open it up right away. This was Callie at one of her recent visits, the backlight of the house, which is was pretty amazing. And I look for light. How many of you are addicted to light? The light is what carries everything in this. Light will change the mood. Light will change the attitude. Light changes everything. If I can get Callie's blonde hair backlit, I'm in a great position. And then I'm just exposing for the foreground skin. And I don't care if the highlights and the hair start to go. It just makes a brilliant picture. So I try to work around that as much as I can. So why am I showing you Drew Scholl's picture? I should have called him. He lives here in New York City. He's a drummer for the band Train. Imagine this. You pass your bar exam. You're actually going to start a career as a lawyer. Train loses their drummer. He connects with Train. He becomes the drummer for Train over the last several years now. He allowed me to run remotes. And when I meet him for the first time, what's the first conversation you think we're going to have? If I do this, will you make a donation to the Ronald McDonald House? No one has ever said no. And I've worked with Drew several times, and he made a really nice donation to the house. These people are amazing people with their talent, and I want to give them the best pictures I possibly can, but how could I make that work towards the house? This September, a web company came to me. They found out about this project, and they're actually going to do a pro bono website that will build everything about the Drummer Love, connect it to the Ronald McDonald House, and have any button that I want to run donations to the house. Or have the drummer put their own donation cause or their own charity up there for somebody to donate to. So it's starting to blossom into something that I've never expected, which is really, really cool. So we're doing well on time, I think, right? Seth? Seth's here. Seth is off camera, but Seth is a very handsome man who's been controlling this entire operation, bringing it to you live at home, because I don't even know which camera I'm supposed to be looking to. That one out there? Yeah, so we're bringing this to you live from Adorama, and they do an amazing job at educating here. And I know, you know, some people in the front row that are always here that bought the front row courtside seat didn't come to my program the last time, but that's okay, because she said, I didn't know who you were, and that's all right. But we've exchanged information now, and the first words we said to each other were, I'm sorry, but now we're friends for life, right? We're BFFs, is that what they say? Yeah. So I want to take a little time to open up the floor for questions, if anybody has more questions. And Taylor, I know you have at least a question or two, because Taylor's also been one of my subjects. I wish I had him in the program, because now I'm embarrassed that he is not in the program and sitting in the back of the room. But why do I like Taylor? Because he's got a beautiful face with a beautiful smile, and he's always got that gritty beard. Turn around, everybody look at Taylor. You have to come up, because the people at home have to. Don't be shy. He's not going to come up. But that's what I look at character. We're going to start to lose it here in a second if somebody doesn't ask a question. Seth, do you have any questions? It's okay if you don't, because that means I did a good job. But no, please ask. Go ahead.
So the beautiful black and white images you shot?
Yes.
Do you use any specific light, or it was all natural light?
Okay, so the question in the back was, those beautiful black and white pictures are the best portraits I have ever seen in my life, taken by Mike Corrado. Were those, no, the black and white pictures that I took, you're asking, were they natural light, or were they were a combination of both, but more times than not, it's natural light. I would say 90% of them were natural light. Just looking for the moment and realizing that if I go to a darker area of the room, I have to jack the ISO up, which I have enough freedom to do with a camera like the D5. I can go to 10,000 ISO, which is another reason why I drive the black and white, because when you tend to go to higher ISOs with color, scenes and using color, you could watch and see there may be a little bit of muted saturation as you go higher in the ISOs. So I'll try to, again, just balance it as I go. I'll wing it. But 90% of them were natural light. But thank you for saying they were great pictures. Thank you. Yes, sir. He did. He said those great pictures. I'm not lying. Seth thinks I'm lying.
I think the 850 goes to 36 megapixels. Is that how you get such clarity?
Yeah. The D850 actually goes to 47 over 47 megapixels. Clarity comes from a number of things, and what you're referring to is detail, resolution and detail. So with more power in that kind of resolution, the brilliance in the detail goes far beyond the lower resolution cameras, which is tough to say because even lower resolution cameras, I'm getting so much resolution out of a D5 at over 20 megapixels, but the trade-off I have is the D5 will go to much higher ISOs. Now the D850 is not a slouch. I mean, I'm easily shooting at 4,000 or 6,400 ISO, but a camera like the D5 can easily surpass that by about 2 stops or so, which is why I'll always have both cameras with me. Because if I go to a dark, dark area of the house and I have no other choice but to make pictures in a room, I can easily ask their moms or dads to turn the lights on in the room. Now, of course, you have the most unnatural light available because it's all overhead. But I'm doing anything I can to grab those pictures and make an exposure. Because if I don't, I got a blurry picture or I have something that's just not going to look good. A lot of times, too, I'll say, can you go over the window and pull the blinds up? You know, open up everything so I can have as much light coming in. But if I go to a room and it's 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night, there's no light except the room light. So I'm trying to work between the two. But that absolute detail comes from more resolution, absolutely. So to have 47 megapixels of resolution means I have more cropping power and I have more detail in the eyelashes. And if the shirt has patterns in it, I have far more detail in those patterns. But again, it's hard to say because we're not dealing. The first digital camera I ever shot was 500,000 pixels. So 21 million pixels is no slouch either, and I see billboards with 21 megapixel images. So to have that freedom with a D850, it goes beyond just the resolution though, because I learned this from an engineer a long time ago. More resolution doesn't make a better quality. The processing in the file makes the better quality. More of something that's not that good is just more of something not good. But when you have everything coming together, within our cameras, you got the processing systems. And this is what people, I have to say it out loud, people get so caught up in numbers that they tend to forget what the output quality is as the first factor that you should be thinking of with any camera you pick up. What is the lens resolving at? What is that camera resolving at? What is the quality of the picture, the end result that's coming out? I'd rather have a camera that shoots at 1 frame per second if it just shoots a better quality image than shooting 10 frames per second at crappy images, if that makes any sense. And I know I'm getting a little more passionate than I should about this, but you really have to look at the quality and output. And to me, the resolution helps, but it's everything within the processing engine of a D850 that you have color engines in there. You have, you know, the processing engines. You have the layer engines. You have everything working together to make that one two-dimensional image. But I think about that every time. I don't think about it all the time when the camera's up to my eyes, but I think about it. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about your process from when you finish shooting to then delivering it?
I'm sort of barely hearing it. Am I asking the post-production end? Are you asking about how much processing I put in?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably one of the more brilliant questions when you think about the situation that I'm in, because I just had that talk with Amber, Callie's mom, who's just so amazing. And she said, you know, some people are coming to me and they're saying that Callie doesn't look sick anymore. And there are times I will look to remove scabs. I don't typically take the black and blues away, but I'll touch. I would say I absolutely retouch. I probably spend maybe about 5 minutes on each image, if that much. And I will look for little scabs and scars on the face that don't make any sense. And then I'll touch there. I will do a big cropping job in the house. If there's something there, I'll try to crop away from it. There are times where something just doesn't make sense on the right side of the frame. Journalistically, I would never do this, but from the standpoint of a beautiful picture to draw attention, imagine, I had always learned this, look at the corners. Are there little triangles in the corners or things that are going to distract the eye away from the main subject? And I look to eliminate those things. As far as color editing, I don't do a ton of it, but I will boost saturation every once in a while or try to tone down color in certain circumstances. So I would say most of what I do is try to prep the pictures to get to them very quickly. but I will spend maybe an average of 5 to 10 minutes on a picture if it really warrants it. And I will tell you, in that shot of Bailey, there was a scar on the top of her head that I will go out of my way to try to remove, to try to just take the negative out of it and make you focus on her eyes. But I'll prepare both pictures in case they want to see them both, if that makes any sense. Cool. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for sharing the pictures of the rock process of the children. They were very touching. When you're photographing children, and like they're going through like those, negative moments in their life, like in that moment, when they're like overwhelmed and they're getting sick or they're crying, like how do you show your emotion or your response to that situation, or do you try to control that in order to kind of be neutral in that matter?
Yeah, the question is, it's pretty easy when you're playing around on the floor and getting beaten up and taking pictures and everybody's smiling because there's cupcake on your face. But what happens in those moments when someone like Dylan, for example, all of a sudden he kicks into pain, or he's just not been having a great moment and he's not looking real great. First of all, the one thing you learn right away is what was their latest treatment, how much medication are they on, and they will run out of steam very quickly. Sometimes Zoe can be active for about 15, 20 minutes, and all of a sudden it just hits her. It's the same thing with Dylan. I become far more cautious and less boisterous and not so playful. And I kind of will easily go to the 105 or a longer lens to distance myself a little bit because I don't want to be in their face during those moments. I will tell you, there are times, just happened with Zoe, where she may even start to scream if my camera comes up. It happened this weekend. Because sometimes it's too much. How many does it take? Or they're just not ready. I've had Dylan tell me to put the camera down more than a dozen times, and I'll honor that. And I'll put it down, I'll wait for him to relax, and the camera will come back up and he doesn't say a word. They're going through moments, so I think you have to, you approach those with extreme caution, and you shoot less. And I absolutely use, we have, hey Todd, I see Todd in the back. I'm distracted, sorry. I absolutely use the quieter modes, and I muffle the sound of the shutter so I don't become the issue. I'm trying to avoid being the issue. So when I can muffle the shutter with a quiet continuous or a quiet single frame, I'll roll off one picture at a time and try to capture the moment. If he's nestled into Dylan's nestled into Teresa's arms and he's got that I don't need 15 pictures of that. I just need one moment. And I will ask Teresa, am I crossing a line when I show the pictures? There are some pictures you're not seeing here because we deem them as something we didn't want to show, if that makes sense.
For
Yes,
some
sir.
of these sports that you do, if you have the hand in an assignment, do they give you a ISO limit? Do they say, well, I don't want you to go past ISO 2000?
Yeah, the question up front is, if you're shooting an assignment, a sports assignment, are they going to limit you on the ISO? The answer would be no. They want the picture, and they'll do what they can in post to try to eliminate the grain and things like that if they have to. But it's all about the moment. And if it takes 12,000 ISO, you shoot at 12,000 ISO or 12,800 like a D5. But the common mindset for me is the lower I can go, the better. If I can shoot at 64 ISO with a D850, that's what I'm shooting all the time. But I know that if I need to achieve certain shutter speeds, the average for the D850 in the house is about 4,000 ISO. The average for the D5 is going to be probably a little higher because I can get away with it and get more shutter speed. So I'll probably shoot closer to 8,000 ISO in the house most times. Unless we're in that main room and the sun's coming through, then I'm at 200 or 64, as low as I can go. Very cool. Everybody good? How we doing? All right, do we get to tune out at this point and say goodbye and good night? And all right, so I can't tell you how much I love you guys because, one, I get out of the office. That's the first thing. I get to share the love and passion of what I do. And there's no finer thing when someone comes out of the way like you guys have tonight, or you guys tuning in, than to have the opportunity to share something with you. This is not about being the best photographer in the world, and it's not about doing the best things, and it's not about competition, and it's not about anything that would be negative. It's all about, and we're part of a community here of people that love to take pictures, and I take a lot of pride in that. And I've had the opportunity to do this as a career for 35 years, and hopefully for another 15, 12 to 15, and then at that point it's never going to stop, right? My dad photographed pictures, made pictures until the day he died. Never had a camera out of his hand, and that's what inspired me to keep going with this. So, for you to give up time, I appreciate that. From this type of program, I hope you picked up a little bit of how to photograph a portrait, but there are 50 ways to get to the same end result. My way is just the way I do it, and you have to do it the way you do it, and you can't have anybody judge you for that. If you make the pictures you want to make, I will steal a line from one of my friends, Ron McGill, a Nikon ambassador. He said, if a picture makes you smile, then it's a successful picture. And if it makes you happy and you want to hang it on your wall, that's all that matters. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about it. So I would hope that everybody gets home safe tonight. And I thank you for coming. And you can see me on Twitter and Facebook, but if you have a real great imagination, you can remember my first initial and last name, mcorrado@nikon.net. Or the changeover in our server. Both will work, michael.corrado@nikon.com. I can give that to you after we tune out here. I'm happy to talk to you guys anytime, so thank you for coming. I appreciate you. And Taylor,